A pleasure to meet all at last. Welcome back once again to films I'm willing to talk about again. And so, what we're going to do here is, well, of course, I've taken a bit of a break from this sort of stuff, but that's because there's only so many new movies that I'm hoping to see. But for the month of September, it will certainly be a big one. With the likes of Beetlejuice, Transformers 1, and The Wild Robot, I'm certain that they are going to be gems worth shelling out for. But in terms of the upcoming hit, Beetlejuice, that's less than a week away. And so, I'm going to spend the entire week from today, September 2nd, all the way to Friday, with 3 more films in mind before the release of Beetlejuice comes out, and I'll likely have that taken care of by next Sunday, September 8th. And so, let's get ahead and try ourselves a little hit from Blue Sky. You might remember when I talked quite a bit about the other films from Blue Sky, mainly the Ice Age films. And if you're ever wondering, yeah, there might have to be a time where eventually I'll go on ahead and make a full video based on the latest installment, Adventures of Buck Wild. Oh, that one's gonna be a doozy. But ignoring that, we're going to try a different piece from Blue Sky that they offered back in 2005, known as Robots. Yep, we're going at it with this one. I'd say out of all the Blue Sky films, apart from the Ice Age series, as well as some other hits like Spies in Disguise and whatnot, this definitely was a memorable piece for me based on anything that Blue Sky has ever made. And in terms of how it is as a movie, well, it's basically what the title suggests and implies. It's the entire world of robots living together, working together, and most importantly, saving each other from a certain doom in the scrapyard. But maybe more specifically, it tells the story of Rodney Copperbottom, a young man who has in fact envisioned a certain idol of his on TV to one day work in the grandiose metropolis known as Robot City. Unfortunately for him, it only goes so well. But maybe the story is best told from the very beginning. Well, like all robots, apparently, they're first assembled from an instruction manual. Basically, the Copperbottom couple, they basically go on ahead and assemble Rodney from the ground up. And Rodney is, of course, fully assembled. And as the years go on, certain functions, parts, components, etc., they're all put into him until finally he reaches the age of a young man. He basically learns at a young age about Bigwell, an exciting entrepreneur of Robot City, whom is in fact responsible for a lot of different things that have occurred, and he was more than inspired to take on the same dream as Bigwell himself once did, even doing that famous domino effect. Yeah, it's quite a literal sense of a common phenomenon. But in any case, when Rodney does grow up, gets himself a job working alongside his dishwasher of a father, eventually it doesn't quite go so well for him, as he basically has an assistant that he had been working on for some time to try and make the workload a little less stressful. And wouldn't you know, they allowed Ricky Fontaine to come into the picture with his song Shine. Yeah, that's quite a unique montage, set to a unique funky rhythm that's kind of the main characterization in terms of the soundtrack. But still, it's full of some nice copyrighted songs. In the same regard as other movies had caught on to this known phenomenon, like Forrest Gump or Zoolander, Robots does have its fair share of popular songs. Not just Shine, but other hits like Lowrider, for instance. Anyways though, when the assistant unfortunately gets himself into a bit of a tangle, the boss gets a bit fed up, orders Rodney to get out of the kitchen, and this is basically the point in the film where it all comes down to that Rodney decides he wants to make his move. It's likely he earned enough money to make a one-way trip to Robot City. His parents go to stop him, but his father does reinforce the idea that His son should be capable of making these types of choices. And maybe more importantly, to have a big job, to be able to pay back for the damages that happened in the kitchen. He's got quite a plan there. He even brings his assistant along for the ride to ensure that nothing bad should happen. Upon arrival at the station from his train, it all becomes quite clear. He probably will be meeting a lot of faces, including a rather hectic and somewhat dysfunctional photographer. And might I add that in terms of the casting, we have Rodney himself, whom is voiced by the one and only Ewan McGregor. And you might remember the same actor whom also has been playing Obi-Wan Kenobi for some time. But maybe more importantly, with the rest of the cast, you have other well-known members, including Chris Wedge, Robin Williams, Mel Brooks, Amanda Burns, Jennifer Coolidge, etc. In any case though, Fender, the name of this photographer character, is rather ecstatic to see Rodney, even when they hitch aboard a ride on some sort of orb. An orb that basically transports them up and over the city and down and all throughout the stuff. It's like an insane Marvel run, which that was one of the most memorable sequences in the entirety of scene work in a film that I've ever recalled. And I could probably name various other things that went down, like that Ruby Goldberg style thing that was set up in Goonies that allowed Chunk to get in through the gate to the house. Or maybe there's other phenomenons in Robots that I could in fact talk about. And this orb sequence does get revisited later on in the film. Anyways though, when Rodney makes his final stop, the entrance to the corporation that Bigwell is known to work in, the friendly toll booth guy, just the little one sitting there on the booth, allows Rodney to go inside, but then slams the gate in front of him. Oh man, that does crack me up, admittingly, in the same way that he himself is cracked up. Of course, Rodney does try to persevere and try to gain an advantage by going up instead of through the gate. But even when he gets to the top and gets a little vision through the window, the top floor, a conference room, which is apparently a place where a certain robot by the name of Ratchet, he apparently is hosting some sort of meeting. A meeting that does in fact seem to catch on to Rodney's eyes. And even though he tries to see what's going on, he unfortunately fails. Gets out of the building completely magnetized. I mean, little particles are just all over him, and he tries to get it all off, but the magnetization of the energy that's onto him, unfortunately, it causes it to contort into clown hair and an afro and a rock star mohawk. Like I said, this movie is just full of comedic relief. Stuff that you didn't even think would be in a movie about robots. Anyways though, the main baseline here is that Rodney unfortunately cannot get to Bigwell no matter how hard he tries. And this guy, Ratchet, just doesn't seem to want to do business with him. Almost like something is wrong in this situation. But hey, at least Rodney does in fact find solace. Go into a nearby village along with the one and only Fender. And they both basically meet up with his friends. His friends, of course, including the likes of Piper and Herb and Cappy. Yeah. Names were not necessarily as fabled or as well regarded as we would have thought. But hey, they all have themselves unique problems in life. We know that Fender is kind of a broken down mess, but take a look at the others. You got one person out there whom gets a little too cranky, one whom apparently lost his voice, and another who just can't seem to manage their household that well. And then, on top of that, you have Aunt Fanny. Yeah. That itself is self-explanatory enough, I suppose. But hey, when time passes, things eventually start to add up, we do get to find out Rodney's next move. We do get to see that he goes into the same old showroom where Big Weld himself, believe it or not, once hosted his show years ago. Even having the dominoes still set up. But oh boy, when Rodney knocks him over by blowing the dust off, it's just incredible. The site itself is massive. A domino setup that's unlike anything we had ever seen in the show, or maybe Rodney himself had seen. I don't quite recall a domino setup that incredible. The internet kind of does a better job at this sort of stuff though. But in this movie, it at least gives it a run for its money. I mean, remember all those Flippy Cat setups? Yeah, neither do I. Anyways though, it does actually, believe it or not, allow Big Weld to finally make an appearance in the film. Yeah, he's surfing along the wave of dominoes. He manages to save the two that are there. But let me tell you, even after all that, Rodney meets his idol in person, and yet this Big Weld guy just isn't necessarily willing to work with him to take down Ratchet and the corporate suit that had taken place. He explains that of course Ratchet was the reason for all this. Of course Ratchet has made big changes to Robot City, but maybe not in the best way. But the real problem, of course, wasn't just with Ratchet. It was from another person, Madame Gasket. Yeah, if you thought that it was crazy enough that you had one guy who was basically the boss of a lifetime, think about it. You have someone else whom he works for, and she's literally in the bowels of the city. The underground, in which it seems that almost everything is controlled in a really bad way, in a corrupt empire sort of situation. It kind of gives off that sort of Blade Runner vibe to it, and possibly even the likes of, well, other sci-fi related stuff. In any case though, it's a combination of Ratchet and Gasket. Crazy how the names rhyme. But even more crazy when you get to know about what the plan is to stop them and bring Big Weld's own vision to life within the city. Well, Rodney comes up with the plan. He's going to storm the empire of Madame Gasket. He's going to bring down the corporation itself by force. Because if words aren't enough, action must be taken. And so he assembles everybody he's got alongside him, including Piper, Aunt Fanny, and the many, many, many other unfortunate citizens of Robot City, assembling them in a massive alliance to take down Ratchet and Gasket. And when he does, it's an epic brawl that could only be matched by the likes of other well-known franchises, like Star Wars, or we could even talk about that huge war that went out in 300. Boy, it's that classic tale of two sides, two armies, coming together and smashing into each other head on. It's that little scene work that I always enjoyed in these types of movies. It really escalates to a full-on war that does end in a climactic way. It does overall help allow the film to become a big adventure, wrapping itself up with a unique defeat of Gasket and Ratchet. They both end up piles of scrap, with Gasket going into the furnace and Ratchet getting hung up high with just small pieces of metal. Yeah, quite a way to end the film if you ask me. One's burned and one's stripped away. But you know what though? At least Rodney does in fact get to fulfill his destiny. And Big Weld is able to grant the many wishes of his people in Robot City. We finally get to hear a certain voice appear out of nowhere from a voiceless character. And of all things he could do, he could sing James Brown. Yeah. And on top of that, Rodney's own dad gets himself his dream fulfilled, going from a dishwasher to an instrument player. And boy, does this final piece in the movie really help make it a memorable piece for Blue Sky. And of course, after 19 long years, it still holds on in a pretty unique way. Mostly because the fans of Ewan McGregor and Robin Williams. And because there's lots of them, even today, after many years, since Robin Williams had unfortunately departed. There still are a lot of things that are memorable about this. The orb sequence, indefinitely for me. And of course, the parts of the soundtrack, including War, James Brown, and Ricky Fontaine being used in the soundtrack, and several other things, do in fact have lots of memories within me. And I surely will hold on to them for a long, long time. And this movie itself will certainly never be forgotten. It wasn't entirely a masterpiece even by today's standards, but it still works in its own unique way. So in that sense, I give this movie a good 7.2 out of 10.1. Not a masterpiece, but it works well enough given the material that it was provided. In any case though, we still do have a lot to work with here. And I definitely got a lot of new movies to cover, as well as old ones, so I will be back on Wednesday with some more material and some other films to cover. Till then, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side.
Whatever I want, I usually get, and I'm thinking I want you, but I don't have you yet. I ain't got no tricks to be playing